Hello and welcome to the Cybersecurity and Information Systems Information Analysis Center podcast. Today will be a digest show where we at CSIAC will take the most important articles from the last 2 weeks and discuss their importance in the world of technology and cybersecurity. To see all of the articles that we reference today on today's show, visit www.csiac.org/CS Digest. You can also subscribe to our CS Digest mailing list to receive a news summary curated for cybersecurity professionals across a wide spectrum of topics. My name is Sean Bird.
I'm Cully Patch.
And I'm Michael Van Stieber.
Awesome. So, for people that don't know, the digest it's that culmination of the 2 weeks of articles. So we picked the top 5 articles that we thought were most relevant, and we made some notes on them. We just want to discuss and why they're the most relevant and most important. The first we have is hackers halt plant operations in Watershed cyberattack. So in a possible state-sponsored attack targeting major infrastructure systems using Triconix safety technology by Schneider Electric, it was disclosed by FireEye, who investigated the incident after the intrusion was detected by the energy plant. The plant discovered this after hackers may have unintentionally shut down systems while probing the network. Schneider Electric stated, "Evidence suggests this was an isolated incident and not due to a vulnerability in the Triconix system or its program code." They also said that there may be other attack vectors.
And I believe they also thought it was a state-sponsored attack, which makes sense because a lot of these attacks on ICS systems tend to be state-sponsored because there's no money involved in hacking ICS systems, so usually they're backed by some country.
Which I thought was it could be leading into ransomware, though, so the non-state sponsored side would be holding someone's water supply hostage for Bitcoin or something like. I think, perhaps, I don't know.
Oh yeah, I mean that's a definite possibility. I saw as part of the article there that it was more likely that they went from the unknown unknown to the known unknown when a system went to fail-safe mode, and they pretty much think that the attacker was trying to probe their way through, and in the process of probing, they actually caused something to fail.
Yeah, while they were probing around the network. Yeah.
Accidentally, yep.
Yeah, and in that process of, that's an obvious exploitation or enumeration type thing where you're going into trying to see what's going to happen and how you can do certain things. So I could see that as a definite APT type operation.
Now, Triconix is industrial safety technology from Schneider. They're getting a lot of the bad rap for this, but those are just the systems that were infected. I think not that they didn't want to take the blame for it, but it kind of also relies on whatever cybersecurity implementations you have in place at your industrial complex. I don't think a lot of these factories have good cybersecurity practices, especially outside the U.S. If you're in foreign countries, I don't think they have great cybersecurity practices.
Right, and usually they're running on older, outdated systems that are hard to patch, and they don't have the cybersecurity team like you were talking about.
Yeah. Right, and especially when that becomes networked via the internet or something of that nature, that really opens up their cyber footprint to be vulnerable to these type of attacks.
Yeah, like you have Shodan and all that stuff where you can kind of see what's out there.
Right.
So, Shodan?
Yeah, it shows systems that are available on the internet, basically.
Oh, okay.
And like it'll give you like ports that are open, stuff like that, kind of.
Right.
Just information.
But I think you're right. I mean, it was the key part. They do talk about that there was an advanced technique that actually got them to the workstation, and that's key because once you're in the workstation, then obviously you have a lot more access to begin with.
Yeah.
So you might even be operating as a normal user at that point.
And then it reminded me, they even mentioned later in the article that it was reminded them of Stuxnet, whereas Stuxnet being kind of the leading and first big on the Iranian nuclear program being that attack and really setting them back, it kind of opened up that whole realm, and now we're going to see, I think, this is the reason why they said Watershed, and for those of you that don't know, because I always forget what Watershed means, it means a turning point or a pivotal moment, they think that it's going to lead into the next realm of state-sponsored cyber attacks and cyber warfare is on our infrastructure. So, and this can include even all the way up to financial institutions being part of your country's infrastructure.
Right. I think they were saying that the attack would have to be heavily modified to work on other systems, but they're afraid that it'll be copied again in the future.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they quote that there's three main viruses that have come out. The Stuxnet virus in Iran in 2010, Crash Override and Destroyer, which possibly used in Ukraine in 2016, and what they call the Triton one at this particular time. But it really concentrates on, when I studied the Stuxnet report based on the semantic report, and a lot of that has to do with obfuscation. A lot of that code was dedicated to the fact that it had to be set up so that it knew it wasn't there, because as soon as someone knows it's there, then you're going to go after it. But if you set up the sensors to play that everything's fine, and both to the operators and to the security folks, then you have the persistence to be able to do things as Stuxnet did very discreetly, and was able to get their job done without being, actually detected.
So to move on to our next article that we picked out this week, Home Economics, How Life in 123 Million American Households Was Exposed Online. Alteryx, I think that's how you say it, Alteryx, an analytical firm, exposed all of the data from both the 2010 census partnered with valuable consumer data from Experian Consumer View marketing database. Together, these two data sets reveal specific information about millions of households in America. These range from home addresses, mortgage information, financial history, and varieties of other personal purchasing behavior. This was discovered by Cyber Risk Research when they found the files improperly hosted on AWS, allowing any AWS user to view the files.
Yeah. I don't know.
Cloud mismanagement, right?
Yeah, I mean, and this could have been a one-off. I mean, obviously you've got a lot of good security going on, and then the one that actually gets discovered and gets talked about the most. But it is a good example of the increasingly outsourcing of our security, where there's a lot of good advantages of the cloud itself, but at the same time you're also putting your security into trust of someone else, a third-party vendor in this case. And so even though you may have your stuff very secure, once you put us into that cloud environment, is it actually secure from a outside or of the cloud part, where they're talking about of the cloud versus
so trusting your cloud service provider is always going to be a big thing, especially when you're dealing with government systems and moving government systems to the cloud. One, you have to manage your information correctly, and then two, you're relying on all of their security. You inherit all of their security flaws, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yep, but it's also, I imagine it'll be incentivized by the market, where obviously they don't want that to occur, because then they could go to another user like Azure or someone else.
Yeah,
So that these things will probably take care of themselves in those areas. But the key part about this data, though, a lot of it was, yes, the Census Bureau stuff was widely,
that was
fully
public.
public.
Yeah.
It combined with the other stuff from Experian. But this stuff is actually equivalent to the old-fashioned selling mailing lists to different companies around the
Right.
and so they buy those lists of things so they can send junk mail to you or advertisements. And so this data is not necessarily hugely classified or that type of data, but
It's not entirely sensitive, but
right.
put together, you're gleaming so much off of a person's life that I think it can be used for an identity theft type of thing.
And I think it's important also to point out that that when you sign up, you should pay attention to what you're allowing companies to do with your data once you give it to them. Because if I remember correctly, Experian said, we told these people that this is how we're using their data, not in the breach portion of it, but we're collecting your data and we're selling it to other companies. Yeah,
they didn't say that their data was going to be breached, but
right. Yeah.
They said they're going to sell it to other companies.
Yeah. Yep. So you got to watch out what you're accepting in your agreements.
Right. Yep. And that's key, because this data is out there, and and we may want to be able to. This is a good example because this could have been more sensitive data in the same situation, And so these things have to be taken care of in terms of security. But the actual data itself, it may be a good opportunity to ask ourselves, so what? This data is out there. There's a lot of breaches. It seems to be that if someone wants the particular data, they'll have it. And
They could have paid Experian for this data. I mean, I think it was one of the largest consumer research type of marketing databases out there for that sort of thing. So they can just pay for it, but it was the fact that it's out there for free, I think, was what the article was trying to really drive home.
And especially if they said if this was more sensitive data, and as you mentioned, government services are going on cloud services, and this will have to be balanced.
Yeah, as more companies move to the cloud. Yeah.
I also thought of all the security questions that people could answer based off of that data.
Yeah, exactly.
Where was your last 3 addresses and stuff like that? And what was your mother's maiden name? All that jazz.
Exactly.
Right.
So one of the next articles was the Emotet Banking Trojan, analysis of dropped malware morphing at scale. Discovered by Bromium, this is the Emotet Trojan from 2014. Emotet sniffs network information using open network APIs and registry entries. This allows the Trojan to see traffic outside of encryption. Trend Micro did a very nice write-up on this. I'll include this in the show notes that are below the video on the CSIAC webpage. Traditionally, Trojans like Emotet are thwarted via signature recognitions. However, this is because this is being circumvented by hackers by repackaging the Trojan executables to be unique for every victim. So, Trend Micro did a write-up in 2014 on that. So, this is not so much about Emotet itself on what that is. It's more of just the payload. The delivery method is what mainly is interesting in this article, I think, because of how they're packaging it. So they're taking the executable and they're repackaging it so it has a different signature. So
on a large scale, too.
Yeah, on a large scale. Yeah. So each victim has a different signature that Symantec or any antivirus or any heuristic screening kind of software can't detect because the signature changes every time.
Right.
So how do you track it?
Yep. And the hashes for that malware are completely different each time as well. So.
Yep. Yeah, the article does a good job of showing the comparisons of the actual executable being totally different, and then it shows the actual system sequences being almost exactly the same.
Yep. And obviously the payload's the same, being Emotet.
Yep.
So I think to curb that, I'm sorry. What were you gonna
I was just going to say another reason how antivirus can get circumnavigated.
Yeah. Why
you can't always trust it to be 100%.
I think a lot of normal consumers just blindly trust these antiviruses instead of following good practices. So I think it's really good for people to really vet the sources in which they're getting their software for this sort of thing and isolate any untrusted executables. Now, your normal user, I don't think, knows how to isolate an executable.
Right.
But so really vet those sources when you're grabbing, executables or install files from online. I think that would probably be the biggest way to curb that.
Right, and trusted sources. And they go on to talk about their solution in the end, which looks at more of a app isolation, app control type of a technique, and it looked interesting in terms of having to look at it from that standpoint.
Yeah, there's a few vendor products out there. I know Komodo, and then they were talking about, this is a Bromium article. They were talking about their product. A lot of products out there to do that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about one more article just before we run out of time here, because we're encroaching upon the time limit.
Okay.
I want to talk about this one because this was just cool and it's very relevant. A massive brute force attack infects WordPress sites with Monero miners. Basically, in short, I wrote basically leeching people's servers' power to mine cryptocurrencies. If they're able to get into your WordPress logins, they can install crypto mining add-ons that leech off of your processing power and your network bandwidth.
Right. And cryptojacking has become a real problem where JavaScript's embedded in a website, and then all of a sudden you go and visit a web page, and in the background it's using your CPU resources to mine Bitcoins.
So people don't even know about this.
Or Monero,
or Monero.
Crypto.
But yeah, you can do any cryptocurrency mining in there. I think Monero was because they used Monero because it had doubled in price.
Yeah, they were watching the price.
Yeah, so whichever cryptocurrency is probably the most lucrative, they'll install, and whichever is not being used as much as well.
thought it was interesting about WordFence talked about how they used a combination of common passwords with heuristics, and then they had the GitHub breach of 1.4 million or billion clear text username password combinations that might have triggered the attacks.
Yep.
So I mean, this is just another attempt to do a crowdsource to get obtain money, but combined with a little bit of innovation and some available given passwords and some heuristics, and you've actually been able to use someone else's equipment to get make money. It's
a
crazy.
free cryptocurrency farm. So watch those WordPress logins.
Yeah. Yeah, the biggest thing is you can change the username so it's not admin, so they can't just, because these were brute force attempts on the admin account. If that account doesn't exist, you're okay.
Yeah.
You can also do other things like limiting the IP addresses that can access your WP admin page, or install something like WordFence. So there's options.
Yeah,
Yeah.
your normal security options for securing your web server, for sure.
One of the coolest things I've seen is there's low API. So there's a attack on Android devices that is actually, it's another cryptocurrency miner, and what it does is it does actual damage to the phone itself. So the phone starts overheating after a couple days.
Oh, because
and it will
it's
do
using
physical
your phone.
damage. Yep.
Yeah,
Interesting.
it's crazy. Cryptojacking.
Yep.
I haven't had that affect me personally at all, but it's apparently it's a big thing out there. So I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you guys for joining us. If you would like to see our full CS Digest, visit www.csiac.org/CS Digest, and you can subscribe to it there as well as look at the archived versions that we have from past digests. The CS Digest is sent out bi-weekly. Any notes or links mentioned in the show will be located in the below the video. Thank you very much.